Good morning, YouTube. Warbles on a lot here. Getting ready to set up for the Outsiders and the first dog on the moon. But as you can see, it has actually been sleeting. It is lightly sleeting right now. Outside temperature is 1 degree Celsius. They're calling it a blizzard, but I remember in 1984 when we had conditions something like this, we had 3 feet of snow on the ground for a week, not 3 millimetres of sleet on the windscreen for 3 hours.
Time now for Outsiders. I'm Barry Cassidy, and you're not.
Thanks, Barry. And speaking of spangled drongos, your Outsiders this morning, Wendy Harmer, author and commentator. Morning, Wendy.
Thank you very much.
Quite all right. And Tina joins you too. Professor in the School of Government and International Relations at Griffith University, co-author of The Gatekeepers, and morning.
Morning, Jonathan.
Roger Franklin is here as well, editor of Quadrant Online. Good morning, Roger.
Good morning, Jonathan.
Spangled drongo. Bill Shorten, I think we should begin here because it was Bill's week in the spotlight. 900 questions over 2 days is Bill.
Bill Shorten has emerged from 2 days in the witness box, canvassing his time as National and State Secretary of the Australian Workers' Union. Mr Shorten has admitted to failing to declare an 8-year-old political donation, and he's been accused of a conflict of interest for allowing the union to accept direct payments from a company while pay rates were being negotiated for workers. A number of Labor MPs have told the ABC Mr Shorten has lost some skin, but they maintain there hasn't been a smoking gun. Labor frontbencher Brendan O'Connor has praised Mr Shorten's performance.
Roger, it was a moment rich in metaphor. Skin off, no guns found. What did you make of it all?
Well, if you couldn't find a gun, it was probably because the smoke was so thick you couldn't see it. No. Seriously, here's a guy. Put it this way. Yesterday there were auctions all over Melbourne. If you were selling it in your house and you found out the auctioneer was taking payments from the buyer, how would you feel about it? And that's what Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton. I'm sorry, I was thinking about another prevaricator there. That's what he was doing.
Slipped through a wrinkle in the fabric of space and time.
Yeah.
And Tiernan, lost bark or living to fight another day?
Oh, look, I think it's very damaging, Jonathan. I think it shows Bill Shorten's inability to cut through either with voters or on the stand. There's no surprises in that particularly. It's reflected in the polling data and, you know, the sort of the despair that seems to be engulfing Labor people who've spoken to press gallery journalists this week. So I think, you know, to me, these things reveal the, you know, the real dilemmas around governance standards around political parties on both sides. That's been an issue here in Queensland where I live, and it's, you know, it's an issue that obviously, you know, is much bigger than just this the question of Shorten this week. I think disastrous for his leadership.
What do you think, Wendy? Should Bob Hobb right? Should he pull the pin?
Well, I think it's Peter Rees who said it's all about the optics, wasn't it? And I think that's right. I mean, it's all very well for we insiders, outsiders to talk about the nuance of political donation and that the Liberals did it too, and Joe Hockey didn't declare this, but that's not what works. What works are Tony Abbott with 3-word slogans, as we know, and as I say, the optics. I think one of the reasons that Tony Abbott is not doing so well at the moment is not really because of his policies, because he does stupid stuff like eat onions with the skin on. And, you know, and where is budgie smugglers, you know, and it's just sort of the optics of it. And they're not good for Bill Shorten, I don't think. In all these things, I was actually listening to a lecture about ancient Greece the other day, of all things, yesterday, and they were talking about the Battle of Sparta. And there was this bloke in the Parliament, a Celon, who wasn't all that sort of popular, and they were worrying how they were going to get rid of the Spartans, and Celon stood up and said, look, I'll get rid of the Spartans for you. So the commander, Nearchus, stood aside and said, okay, mate, if you can do it, go for it. And I was thinking about the ALP leadership, and thinking about the Liberals being the Spartans, I guess.
Oh,
and
I was beginning to think about the IMF, but
well, it's actually good for both.
Altogether.
It's also good about the Greek finance minister. It's a good little fable there.
I mean,
but yes, how about just stand aside and let the person who can do it do it?
Well, that's the thing, I guess. I mean, there's a deeper question, isn't there, Roger? And this is what will play out, I guess, and this is the intention of this Royal Commission, is to throw up who exactly is benefiting and who is being represented by unions like the AW. Although there's a weirdness here. I read a column yesterday from a noted commentator of the right who appeared to be knocking Shorten for doing deals that sacrifice conditions to get jobs and increase productivity. I thought that was actually the main game.
Yeah, look, I'd be inclined to think that if you sit down at a table and you're negotiating deals, there has to be a certain fluidity and plasticity to the terms of the agreement. But what you can't have, and I'll just direct your attention across the Pacific here rather than ancient Greece, and point out that had Shorten done what he did in the United States, he'd have done 5 years behind bars and copped a $15,000 fine.
For which bit?
For accepting payments from a company with which he was negotiating on behalf of his members. It would also be illegal in Britain. Now here it's all right. Now you want to talk about campaign financing? That's terrific, great idea. Why don't we have an opensecrets.org like they have in the US, where you can put in anybody's name and find out who they donated to, and it's updated on a monthly basis. And this is for amounts in excess of $50, not the $10,000 that's here. That'd be a terrific idea. But the idea of billing somebody, getting someone with whom you are negotiating on behalf of a third party, to give you an electoral assistant, particularly after the dirty business that went on in Maribyrnong when Bob Serkin was evicted, leading up to that, it just stinks.
This is the thing, isn't it, Anton? I mean, the broader thing here is across parties. It's the whole thing of funding and donation, and there is an appalling lack of clarity in this country.
Mm-hmm. An appalling lack of transparency around it. Now, at the state level, it certainly was below it was $1,000 and below. That law was changed here, and it's just been changed back to get to the $1,000 level. I think it has to be, I wouldn't be satisfied with monthly updates. I think it needs to be, as and when you receive them overnight and made transparent. And I think, these things happen on. Well, I come back to the governance issue, which is not very exciting, but it tells you, I think, Roger's made the point, these kind of governance standards wouldn't be accepted in any other sector. And really the political class is at a point where it's proliferating the governance arrangements for everybody else, but wildly out of touch with them in their own. And I'd make that point on both sides.
Now, I tell you what is exciting, though, is to wake up this morning and find out how much money was thrown had been thrown at the Royal Commission so far, and that $17 million was made by Minter Ellison, and $3.36 million taken by his interrogator. So that does focus the mind for a lot of people.
Well, and that issue too of how Royal Commissions are being used, that was something which excited a bit of comment this week. Here's Sam Dastiari.
What we've seen here is the Americanisation of Australian politics, where incumbents use these kinds of processes, show trials, to smear political opponents.
There's something in that, isn't there, Roger Franklin? I mean, the Royal Commission since 2007, okay? ALP had equine influenza and institutional child sexual abuse. Coalition has had home insulation and trade unions. The potential costs for those two of around $100 million. Are they just witch hunts? Is it just an excuse to get Gillard, Rudd, Shorten on the stand?
Oh, I hardly think so. I mean, Dastiari's point, it's the touchstone of so much of the comment on the left that, the Americanisation and that simple and misleading label is enough to dismiss something.
But don't we have to go back to Billy McMahon, the last person, the last Prime Minister who didn't have a Royal Commission into the unions?
Well, I think that's probably right, Wendy, actually.
Is this Royal Commission into the unions finding anything that the last major one didn't uncover? It seems to me to be a repetition of the same thing with proper nouns replaced. that corruption is in there, dirty deals are in there. It's just a perennial.
And yet, it is attacking the unions at the moment, like the AWU, the softer edge of the union movement, purely because they're headed by current political figures.
But Jonathan, I think you missed the triangulation point, if you like, about this that sets it in some sort of perspective, and that's that Company A goes to Union B, cuts a sweetheart deal, perhaps pays for an electoral officer under and bills it as something else. And then Company C comes along to the union and tries to get the same deal. It can't get it. Now, this is the real nub of this thing here, that it's anti-competitive, and it not only screws workers, it screws the entire business about being able to bid. And what you've got here is at the big end of town is in bed, some elements of the big end of town are in bed with the union movement, to the detriment of the workers, to the detriment of consumers.
And if Antonin, that's the finding of this Royal Commission, what then can be done about that? I mean, how can what can this Royal Commission recommend that would make sense of that sort of situation?
Actually, Jonathan, can I weigh in on the Americanisation discussion before we go on to that question?
Still open and available to you?
Yeah, I think so. Look, I would say there's been a breakdown of many of the conventions that guided political conduct in Australia in the past. And this tribalism, I don't agree with Roger that this is, something that's always necessary. I think political opportunism, people using incumbency to render their opponents unelectable in the future. I don't dispute, that there are allegations swirling around that aren't reasonable, but we're having these with monotonous regularity in most jurisdictions, and as Wendy points out, at no small cost. I think the point about that is it reinforces, it's almost a radical departure from the kind of the conventions that governed political behaviour in Australia. You win and then you smash so that people can't get back in. And then with no kind of thought about how that accretes and accumulates over time. And so, I really think there's a challenge with that. I think it's the hardball tactics, notwithstanding the irony of Sam Dastyari making this point, I do think those hardball techniques are coming into our political culture in a way that I don't know many of us are that comfortable with. And I suppose the thing we lack in terms of an American system are the checks and balances on executive power that characterise that system and the pluralism that characterises that system. So I think we have to be very careful, and this just is reinforcing this tribalism that is so off-putting, and it makes it impossible to have many of the sensible debates that we need to have about politics. Yep. So to come back to your question, if you want me to, or we can go on from there.
Well, I think that was pretty good.
That was excellent.
Outsiders here on Sunday Extra, Antonin and Roger Franklin and Wendy Harmer. And a moment here of breaking news to say that Virgin Australia have cancelled all their flights to Bali. Yes, that volcanic ash cloud is back. Virgin saying it's not safe to fly. So
it's so funny. We're back here like freezing.
Yes, well, you can't. Bali
off.
is not available to you, Wendy, as an escape, I'm afraid. And passengers being told not to go to Denpasar Airport as well, 9 to 10. And speaking of political culture in this country, there was I think a memorable moment. Malcolm Turnbull getting up early in the week, this week past, to make a speech, which I don't think it was about leadership. I think it was about Malcolm saying what he really felt he had to say. And sometimes when he does that, it sounds logical and coherent and totally unlike Australian politics.
But Daesh is not Hitler's Germany, Tojo's Japan, or Stalin's Russia. Its leaders dream that they, like the Arab armies of the 7th and 8th century, will sweep across the Middle East into Europe itself. They predict that before long they will be stabling their horses in the Vatican. Well, Idi Amin wasn't the King of Scotland either. We should be careful not to say or do things which can be seen to add credibility to these delusions.
Is that right, Roger, that the politics of fear around terrorism that are running simply boost the stocks of the like of IS beyond their actual capacity to make us truly afraid?
Well, I was intrigued by Turnbull's little spiel the other day. I was wondering if he was trying to position himself again as the alternative Prime Minister within the party, or if you'll pardon me, Jonathan, the Prime Minister candidate favoured by the ABC. But the point he glosses over, in fact I think he deliberately obfuscates, is that, all right, ISIS isn't going to come marching down Barclay Street in Footscray anytime soon.
Which is the impression the PM tries to give. That
Well, actually, if you read what
coming to get us.
If you read what the PM has said about this, in many respects, this is absolutely true.
Okay, here endeth part 1.